So learner, we are going to discuss radiophones. Radiophones are commonly used to occurring format for filling the airtime if there is no other alternative content. It also depends to the greater extent on the ways it has been designed. For the instance, the radio show It's Your World on BBC World Services had the potential for putting anyone anywhere in touch with a major international figure to question policy and discuss the issues of the day. Through public participation, the aim of a phone-in is allow a democratic expression of views to create the possibility of community action. The important question is as to whether the format is inclusive for every listener, or we can say here that telephone ownership can vary widely between regions of the same country, and the cities are generally far better served than the rural areas. As a result, there can a technological limitation in terms of radio format in the case of engagement. It is the producer of a phone-in who decide the aim of program and design it so it achieves a particular objective. If the lines are simply thrown open to the listeners, the result can be highly unsatisfactory. There are always cranks and exhibitionists ready to talk without saying anything, and there are lonely with the real need to talk. Incorrect advices given in the studio will annoy those listeners who know more about the subject than the presenter. By adequate screening the incoming calls in line with the program's policy, the producer can limit the public participation to the central purpose of the show. So learners, we are going to elaborate phone-in programs and specifically the types of phone-in programs. The open line. Open lines are conversation with the studio presenter. The specific subject. Expert advice on a chosen topic is known as specific subject. Consumer affairs. A series providing action advice on a detailed cases is known as consumer affairs. Personal counseling. Problems discussed for the individual rather than the audience. The person vetting the calls quickly develops an ear for the genuine problem, the interesting point of view, or the humorous elements. Such people converse. These things are soon discovered in the initial off-air conversation. In oral communication, information is carried on two distinct channels. One is content, that is what is said, and style, that is how it is said. They should both be under the speaker's control, and to be fully effective, one should reinforce to other. However, due to stress, it is not always easy. The consumer phone-ins is related to the specific subject, but its range of content is so wide that any single panel of expert is unlikely to provide detailed advice in responses to every inquiry. As the range of program content increases, the type of advice given tends to become more general, dealing with the matters of principle rather than the action to be taken in a specific case. For example, we can say here a caller complains that an electrical appliances bought recently has given persistent trouble. What should they do about it? This is the question, what should they do about it? An expert on the consumer legislation in the studio will be able to help distinguish between the manufacturer's and the retailer's responsibility, or whether we can say the matter should be taken up with a particularly complaints council, electricity authority, or the local government department. To provide a detailed answer specific to this case requires more information. What were the exact condition of the sale is, we can say that there is a guarantee period, yes, there is a service contract. Was the appliance being used correctly? Often a program of this type of specializing in the personal problems allowed caller to remain unidentified. Their name is not given over the air. The studio counselor referring to them by their first name only or by an agreed pseudonym. This is done primarily for privacy reasons. It is perhaps surprising that the people will call a radio station for advice rather than ask their family, friends, or specialist simply because they do not have to meet anyone. It can be done from a position of security, perhaps in familiar surroundings where they do not feel threatened. People with a real problem seldom ring the station in order to parade it publicly. Such exhibitionists should be weeded out in off-air screening and help in some other ways. So, we are going to discuss radio feature and documentary. Among the various radio formats, the format of features and documentaries is one of the most fascinating ones. The term feature is used in indicate both studio-based features and documentaries. There is a very thin line of separation between a radio feature and a documentary. The feature is a radio program in which emphasis is laid on the imaginative presentation of facts, while the documentaries are based on actualities. The idea of radio documentary is essentially a takeoff from the documentary films developed by John Kearson, who is considered to be the father of film documentary movement. With the widespread use of portable tape recorders and later with the introduction of ultra-portable tape recorders, the radio documentary emerged as a popular radio format. The radio documentary is based on a documentary evidence, written records, and attributable sources, actual happening, etc. So, its purpose to present a balanced recorded, truthful account of something or someone. What is invented is an imaginative documentation of facts and actualities. The two words associated with the documentaries are variety and actuality. While documentation or actuality is the mainstay of radio documentary, the radio feature writer can take a lot of creative freedom. There is also a hybrid form of feature which combines studio materials with actuality. There is a scope in a feature for imaginative treatment of a fact or even abstract concepts, while in a documentary which confines itself to facts. For example, an imaginary conversation in heaven between Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Nehru on what is happening in India today could form the subject matter of a feature. According to Robert McLeish, the features need not be wholly true in the factual sense. It may include folk songs, poetry, or drama to help illustrate its theme. There are mainly two types of features: narrative features and dramatized features. And we can say in narrative features, the thread of a narration runs through the entire program in which dialogues are avoided. It includes extracts from a variety of sources, including books, memoirs, reports, dispatches, library recordings, etc. Biographical features belong to this particular genre. A narrative feature is possibly on any subject in which the producer can assess the material recorded or printed and create a word picture through appropriate use of assets, material, and suitable narrations. Then there is a dramatized feature. It has the characteristics of a drama, but unlike plays which deal with the fiction. It aims the imaginative presentation of the fact, and we can say here that it is undertaken when OB recording is difficult to obtain or it is not found necessary. On the other hand, radio documentary is generally of two types, one the informative and the other investigative. Informative documentary can be on any subject or theme, person, event, activity, or institution undertaken to widen the horizon of listeners. It tries to involve the audience both emotionally as well as intellectually by presenting a wide spectrum of information. The subject can be an eminent freedom fighter, AIDS awareness, a research institute, or discovery of insulin, etc. In the case of investigative documentary, the title itself suggests investigation over some issues. It takes up special problems like street children, bride burning, drug addiction, corruption in public life, bogus universities, etc. A radio feature or documentary, like any other radio program, has to seize the attention of audience. For that, it is crucial that the features of a strong introduction. The introduction would also depend on the types of radio techniques one may adopt, often sound and music, and not necessarily it is the spoken words that can make the beginning of a program attractive and compelling. In terms of conceptualization, one may have already read in the preceding units that in order to make any radio program, one has to have the ideas and should be able to conceptualize it. A radio person has to be a constant search for a new idea for conceptualizing programs. The same is true while planning radio features and documentaries. The producer has to be very observant and look around the ideas for features and documentaries. While talking to people, interacting while experts, traveling or walking in the streets, bright ideas may flash across his or her mind which may be useful for developing programs. Ideas are also gathered while attending a lecture, watching a play, or a sporting event, or even while buying things in the market. Some of the topics may be from memory, others may stem from an experience or something you strongly feel about. The tips usually given to new producers are: keep a notebook handy to jot down ideas as and when they strike. Be observant while traveling, as good programs originate while traveling. Whatever is being read should be read with a concentration, as any interesting article or news item may give idea for a feature. Talking to different people can generate new ideas for features. Always have an open mind and be receptive to ideas. Then there is the stage of research. This stage helps in critically understanding the subject in question. Very often, the information, data, or document available may not be adequate, hence, research may be required. So, research helps in covering the relevant and vital aspect of issues involved in their entirety and enables in the defining the scope and shaping the focus on the program. It comprises both the library research and field research. Library research is collecting material from the books, periodicals, and reports. And in field research, we can say it includes consulting persons connected with the subject. In many cases, the producer has to develop as a researcher for collecting information from the various sources. Then comes the stage of defining the purpose. A radio program essentially seeks to cater the needs of listeners. One should ensure that the topic chosen is not only be relevant to the target audience but also be comprehensible to them. For this, it is imperative that there should be a clarity in ideas about subject and the treatment. This means defining the objective and the scope of such programs. If there is not done judiciously, one may end up with a plethora of material which would make a production and editing a difficult task. Then comes the stage of scripting a feature and documentary. Features are generally script based. The producer writes the scripts or engages an experienced script writer to write it. The three cardinal principles of spoken words, namely simplicity, lucidity, and euphony, are kept in view while writing the script. A feature is possible without a single OB recording, as inset. The script then lays emphasis on dialogues. However, a feature script is not a talk script, a portion between two or three voices to be read. Here, each voice establishes a separate identity. In the case of documentary, the entire recording is to be heard first. Scripting for a documentary includes a concise introduction to the subject, narration which serves as leading to taped statements, interviews, sound, and an appropriate conclusion. Producers usually script their documentaries themselves, though some prefer to have a professional scriptwriter. A good narration adds a sparkle to the taped actuality. A strong introduction helps to draw the listener. Often sound and music, and not necessarily the spoken words, make the beginning in compelling and interesting. The body of the script comes out as a smooth flowing story which is easily understood by the listener. Once the script has been finalized, the appropriate voice for the narration has to be selected. Narration helps to drive the program forward in a logical way. It helps to preface the voiced passages and recorded inserts. It brings different elements together and molds them in an organic whole. The narration may be done by a single voice or two or more voices. The pioneer of radio documentaries, Melville DeMello, used to write the script himself, which he used to narrate with the telling effect. He always maintained that in a radio documentary there is a need only for one voice to tell a story. However, depending upon the theme of the documentary, more than one voice can be used to infuse variety and reduce the monotony. For example, in 2011, a radio documentary was made on the life and work of famous poet Mirza Ghalib. It was a 10-minute documentary which highlighted the famous works of Mirza Ghalib along with some historical live instances of his. You can see the documentary here. Conclusion. From the above details, the learner will now be clear about the different types of radio formats, followed by how different types of radio formats are essential and what all do they offer in terms of differentiated content for the listeners. So, thanks for being with us. Thank you at all.